We've all been waiting for the science of snowpack. We're going to get a little more in depth than what our last presentation was about. So, snowpack in the Gunnison Basin. I present to you. So basically, we're going to start with what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about what's happening, how it's impacting things, and what we're going to do about it, and how it all began with historical measurement and one man's dream, and how is snowpack measured. We're going to explain why it's important and how it's done, and climate modeling in the Gunnison Basin. So some adaptation strategies and what we're doing here, some controversial methods, and some not so controversial methods. So the NRCS sort of spearheads this. There's a congressional mandate that measures snowpack in the West. It basically started about 50 years ago. It was very simplistic. Zach will get a little more into it, the more manual version of sticking a tube into the ground and measuring the snow density. But basically, the importance of it is water supply management. We all know there's a crisis in California now. There's no water, and they can predict how this is going to turn out by going up and measuring the density of the snow. So they can forecast reservoir supplies and sort of prepare for what's going to happen, or at least, hey, this is going to happen. So, because you can't grow plants without water, and that water comes from snowpack. So, snowpack telemetry, basically short, SNOTEL measurements, and the snow water equivalent. SWE, sometimes you'll see it as the SLE, the liquid equivalent in some studies. And basically, it's a measurement of snow temperature, depth, and the air temperature. And there's 16 local sites that are in the Gunnison Valley, but there's about 730 that are in western states. So basically, these 730 are located in 11 western states, and they report to 2 master stations, and they do this through basically microwave technology, and Zach will explain that a little bit later. And what they do is they report to 2 main stations, and then those go and are basically compounded and figured out at the central station in Portland, Oregon. So here is the local sites here, and you can tell. Here's Gunnison. Here's our reservoir, here's Crested Butte, one right there, and a lot of people will actually go to these SNOTEL sites to kind of, if they're going backcountry, to see what are the snow conditions. And here is one of the graphs that they'll look at if you're looking for a specific area, if you're going snowshoeing, backcountry skiing, cross-country skiing, of what the actual depths are, and you can see that the median is going down over the years. So here is a statewide snowpack graph, and basically it's at 69% normal currently right now. And this is this year's pattern right here. Here's the median. I need a laser pointer. But you can see that basically things are getting worse. And this is the Gunnison Basin, which is at 63%. So we're not doing as good as the actual state. And we can come back and review this a little bit in the summary if you have questions. So now, Zach's going to take over. He had a very interesting interview. We can talk a little more in depth about SNOTEL.
Sure. So these pictures at the bottom kind of are SNOTEL sites across Colorado. This is what the site looks like in the winter. I'm not going to get, for time reasons, I'm not going to get too far in depth with these. These are usually accessed via backcountry skiing or snowmobiling or a combination of both. The snow water content, or the snow water equivalency, is something we'll talk about in the next slide, but it's basically a snow pillow device and a pressure transducer that actually measures the water density within the various snowpack. Snow depth, there's a sonic sensor. It's it's a big kind of power line looking thing that kind of measures depth of snow throughout the season and the air temperatures. Just a shielded transometer or transitor. So this is a site this summer. You can kind of see, there's a lot going on. There's solar panels that operate the whole site throughout the year. Generally, these operate a year without maintenance. Maintenance is conducted by the NRCS, depending on whatever rotation seasonally. The snow pillow down here is the one I want to point out in terms of thinking about the snow water equivalency, and snow water equivalency plays a big role in mainly the The snowpack itself, stability of the snowpack, as well as kind of when we look into the spring runoff seasons, kind of how much water precipitation we can kind of guess to receive out of the given snowpack year to year. I think that's all I want to kind of touch on this one for time reasons. And then how SNOTEL works. This kind of threw me off a little bit, but as Barry was indicating, there's a master station here. They're usually 1,200 miles maximum apart from each other, and then the SNOTEL sites, there's 730 of them throughout the intercontinental West in Alaska. And basically the master station sends out frequency via VHF through like a short-wave radio frequency, and it bounces off the SNOTEL site, goes back, master station interprets that data, and it's all in real time, so you can actually go to the NRCS website and actually look at SNOTEL sites across the West and see kind of what the data characteristics are for each. So going back to the snow-water equivalency, common snowpack measurement measures water content in snowpack, and it varies and fluctuates depending on what kind of snowpack you're in. We in Colorado and throughout areas like Utah, Wyoming, we have a continental snowpack, and a continental snowpack is typically characterized by high pressure systems, lighter snow. It's not quite as dense. And then we also have factors like our avalanche cycles are much more regular than a maritime snowpack. A maritime snowpack is usually denser. It's usually typically characterized by rain events throughout the winter. So rain will actually will fall on snowpacks and actually affect it in different ways and actually break up the compounds a little bit differently. In addition, there's lots of cloud cycles, so that the maritime snowpack is really quick to kind of adapt to its surroundings and its topography, and actually is makes for more violent avalanches, but not necessarily the easiest to trigger compared to a continental snowpack. So let me go back real quick. So the one thing I want to talk about is it's really cool that they measure SWE. Is there's actually this pillow that's actually measures the weight of the snowpack and the accumulation throughout the given season. And how it does that is it actually has a pillow that actually snow lands on top of it, accumulates, and actually the pressure that actually drips out or kind of percolates antifreeze, and then that falls into a lower basin which measures the weight, and that's how they come up with the snow water equivalent. And if Barry or Neil want to touch on anything more specific on that, that's kind of a general overview of that. But it's pretty cool way to measure the water content for snowpacks. So kind of getting closer to our region and kind of looking at within our own basin, in the Gunnison Basin, I interviewed Zach Guy, who's the head forecaster for the Crested Butte Avalanche Center. He's got a master's in snow sciences and a undergrad in geology. And he's been in the basin for 4 years, and I kind of wanted to talk to him about trends in snowpack that he's seen. He's only been here 4 years, but he kind of assesses and looks at data throughout the last couple of decades. In our own basin and close to home in Crested Butte, the Gothic weather station's been operating since 1974, so they have snowpack data and temperature data dating back to there. And then Crested Butte, the town of Crested Butte's been operating since 1962. So in looking at the snowpack, I kind of wanted to ask Zach all these questions about kind of the impacts and kind of see if he had any quantitative data on ways that climate change is impacting our snowpack within our own basin. And he wouldn't really speak to that because he's only got 4 years, but we talked about, looking back at the data, we can see that our seasons are getting shorter and our snowpack is, for the most part, generally trending towards a lower yearly average. And kind of speaking to one of my board members who lived in Crested Butte since 1968, he kind of qualitatively reflected that same notion. And we really talked a lot about this season and kind of what it's looked like. And it's hard to kind of make a general statement only using this 1 year, but this 1 year has been pretty insane if you look at not necessarily snow throughout the season, but really temperatures. In Gothic, 46 out of the last 88 days have been record high temperatures, and that's just kind of unheard of, and it's a trend that Zach and I talked a little bit about, and then we looked at, I kind of asked him about his kind of general perception on kind of what Colorado and our own snowpack is going to look like, say 2 decades from now, based on, you know, trends and data that other people are working on. And he basically said, you know, being at the elevation we are, we're going to be okay, and generally the snowpack's going to remain pretty similar. The only difference is they're going to be shorter seasons, obviously. You know, we'll see a later beginning of winter and an earlier end. Our snow runoff and our spring melts will be much more intense and much earlier than we've seen in the last 3 decades prior. And he said in terms of Colorado, you know, you can really expect that the lower ski resorts and areas where people backcountry ski or snowpacks are important, the lower elevations are really going to be impacted. And since, you know, our basin's high and we're a headwaters community, we won't feel the full effects of other places in the state. And then looking to the other continental west are going to feel like California's seeing now. I think that's all I got with that. We're going to skip this one.
Yeah, we go. Cool. So, we'll talk a little bit about climate modeling in the Gunnison Basin. I think we've all come to the conclusion that climate change will ultimately impact this basin. Specifically agriculture, recreation, and tourism. In 2011, the Nature Conservancy set out a report. It's the Gunnison Basin Climate Change Vulnerability Assessment. And what I wanted to touch on was some of the climate modeling by Linguala. I had a chance to see him speak a few months ago at Western, and I wanted to share some of those findings that I think you guys have used in your presentation as well. So, the overall findings that are going to impact snowpack will be increased precipitation, but rather in form of snow. There's going to be earlier snowmelt and runoff, which will significantly impact the snowpack. There's also going to be reductions in springtime snowpack, and then severity of the frequency of wildfire throughout the state in this basin. This is one of the models from Linguala, and I wanted to show this because this is all about snowpack and runoff. The blue line represents the historic average over the last 50 years. The series of red lines are all the climate models which show earlier runoff. So rather than mid-June in this basin, we're going to see a runoff more than likely at the end of April into May. And this is significant for this valley. So when we talk about adaptation, there's not a lot we can really do with diminished impact. Climate change is impacting this valley. And we're going to talk about 2 separate ideas. One is somewhat controversial, but it should be pointed out as a potential option, and the other is snow fencing. So cloud seeding is the process of shooting silver iodide into the clouds and systems in order to trigger form snow from a system that's otherwise not producing. Snow fencing is another adaptation that allows us to retain snow in the mountains for longer periods of time. There could be a number of ecological benefits from storing snow, from moisture retention, and delaying runoff. Snow fencing is a viable option to minimize the impact from creating new hydroelectric dams and water storage. So I really do support that idea, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. So cloud seeding, just a basic idea. It can be done in 2 ways, either by plane or by generators. Generators are what's shown in this picture. Basically, it's a propane flame that shoots the silver iodide into the cloud system. It freezes and turns ice crystals into snow. And they can be triggered from wherever you'd like to. So everything is done under the Colorado Weather Modification Program, and this is a permitted system. It's a project that is underneath the Colorado Water Conservation Board. Currently there's 23 generators in Gunnison County. It started in 2002. They just ran into a 10-year permit process, so I couldn't find any current news on cloud seeding in the state. But some of the contributors for the program is Gunnison County, Upper Gunnison Water Conservancy District, Gunnison County Stockholders Association, CBMR. So there's a number of people that are interested in this technology, and as well as downstream states, such as Arizona, California, and Nevada. It's about $1 per acre foot is the cost of doing business, but there's also been reports that it's much more, like $30 to $40 per acre foot. So whether it's cost effective or not is unsure. The other problem is there's certainly implications for other communities beyond this valley and how that, triggering, storm events that were otherwise going to be, say, on the Front Range or, eastern plains of Colorado. So we do need to think about that. Colorado Water Conservation Board has a significant amount of money tied into this, over $1 million in the past decade. So. And we'll come back to cloud seeding if you guys have any questions. The other idea I want to talk about is snow fencing. There has been a study not done in this valley, but Nawa Ridge outside Boulder, Colorado. It's a long-term ecological research station, and they used it as a restoration tool to increase water, moisture, and content. And it has a significant impact on shrub steppe ecosystems, such as where we live. So it could be something we could look at in the future. This top diagram just shows a few of the different types of snow fences that could be used. But the second graph really shows the ability for, it demonstrates how snow fences allow for deposition of snow, and that allows for a number of different ecological services that could be a benefit in a changing climate. So some of the findings from the Nawa Ridge study were increased germination and seedling growth, increased production of CO2, increased microbial activity. So these are all very important activities that could change when we have bare ground, bare poor ground, that could diminish a lot of success for a lot of plants. So they found that with the snow fencing, they were able to improve retention from 90 to 115 days, which is significant. It's 3 months of snow where it otherwise wouldn't be. And this also could extend the growing season for some plants. Like I mentioned before, increase soil moisture and temperature. So basically, in the Gunnison Basin, we're going to see a lot of changes, and we need to be ready to adapt to them and sort of think outside the box with some of the solutions that we might consider. In my opinion, my personal opinion, cloud seeding needs some further research, I think, before we really consider that as a viable option. I was kind of surprised to see that Gunnison, Upper Gunnison River Water Conservancy District was on board for it, and as well as some of the, I can see CBMR wanting to support it, but it is somewhat new, and there's a lot of impacts, and it is sort of playing God. Snow fencing, I really do believe, should be considered in this valley, but we're going to see a lot of changes, and we need to be ready to adapt to some of this. I don't know if you guys have any.
Yeah. One thing I just wanted to point out that I forgot in terms of looking at SNOTEL sites. SNOTEL sites are generally in shaded north aspects, and so snow retention in those areas are often higher. So right now, we're at 63%, I think, but our south aspects are almost at 20%. So that's just something to take into consideration that while the SNOTEL actually indicates one thing, it actually might be a little bit worse than that in terms of our current snowpack for this season. And then there's other things that I don't think we have quite time to get into, but dust on snow events is also going to kind of complicate snowpacks in the coming years, especially spring runoff and water availability and water resources moving forward in the next couple of years, depending on the seasons. And yeah, I think that's all I got.
Well, I forgot to mention that the fiscal budget, which is only about 0.7% in the science realms of what the United States gives to things like this. They're initially in 1995, the SNOTEL program received about $15 million, and currently it's actually slowing down. And so numbers like this, they only have about $7 to $8 million that they spend yearly on this program. So research is probably just going to start dissipating, and we're going to have to use future modeling just to kind of guess what's going to happen. Questions?
Do you see any controversial aspects of snow fencing in the sense that it's actually extending the snowpack 3 to possibly 4 months, where downstream users might, call the district engineer or something and say, you know, we're not getting our water, it's being kept shoving out the basin for 3-4 months now?
Yeah, I mean, snow fencing would have to be done on such a large scale for I think it to have a hugely significant impact. But I do agree, it's very similar like with the Nature Conservancy, the project out north of town here. Whenever you're messing with the watershed, there's going to be unintended impacts. One of the zoomy holes or one rock structure is altered someone's flow. It is certainly a consideration. Also, doing any type of project like this on public land is going to have, a number of, it's all going to be through the EIS and the environmental assessment process. So I think that a lot of the big impacts will be addressed, and it might even, keep that from happening because it could create issues. It's not an easy one. It's just sort of something to think of down the road, something aside from just doing nothing.
So, does snow fencing actually increase the amount of water available in the system?
No, it would, to my knowledge, it would just extend runoff. The snow fencing also, the more I learned about it, the more it is used as a control, or it's used to promote certain species with increased germination time and seasonal growth. But I don't see how it could create extra snow. It creates a mass of snow in a certain area, but I don't believe that it's actually going to generate any additional snow just to lay it for late season.
I mean, really, it just catches that snow that otherwise might just blow off and evaporate right into air. It's really just catching that wind-affected snow that's coming off the southerly and westerly areas.
Yeah, you're going to maybe retain some through loss of sublimation, you're limiting sublimation, but then that snow, if it didn't land there, it's going to get blown over to the other ridge into someone else's watershed, and now you're affecting those patterns as well. So, I don't know.
I don't advocate for either of these two adaptation strategies. They're just options, yeah.
Is there anything limiting the ability of, let's say, Gunnison from sea? Like, can you just, I always thought that was like a illegal activity almost.
Yeah, it's through that Colorado weather monitoring program or whatever that is. So it is a state-sanctioned program. I imagine that other states could certainly take them to it, as soon as the state of Colorado. I don't see why, if say Kansas is having decreased, if they could actually attribute it to cloud seeding in Colorado. There also is a lot of science that's saying it doesn't even matter. It's not even that effective. It's like 10%. Even under ideal conditions, you need to have 25 degrees Celsius. You need some wet snow system that's coming in. And they're saying then you might get 10% additional snow from it. So like, it's marginal. And the science isn't there to back it up necessarily. The concept is there. Whether or not it's actually effective to a large scale or whether it's affecting other watersheds.
Do you hear from people in the Salida area that are just about Gunnison doing that?
The only thing I've read from the Arkansas Valley is they support it because cloud seeding that's happening in the Gunnison Basin could very well likely trigger additional snow just on the other side, so maybe not negatively impacting that watershed. I'd be more concerned with the South Platte watershed, South Platte.
Doesn't cloud seeding though still depend on it being cold enough for it to snow? Like, so have they like looked into that as a long-term option? Like Zach was saying, all these high records, the temperature being broken, like is that something that would work for the future? It's not above.
They're doing it all above 9,000. So probably going to have freezing temperatures at 9,000 feet. Lower elevation, I completely agree, it wouldn't be feasible. But above certain elevation, I think it would.